Perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do today is talk a little bit more about vocabulary and how to generate student-friendly definitions and create some opportunities for students to express their understanding of the vocabulary based on context rather than just memorizing vocabulary. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. Okay, so right now I'm sure you guys who are online or are looking at the video or recording of this see my other screen. So let me get here, go back to modules and start working. So I would like you guys to kind of go back to module 4 if you could please in Canvas. So now it's going to be asking me strange questions. Okay. So we're going to work on the vocabulary chart today. We're going to finish it tomorrow. But today we're going to get as much done as we can with the time we have. There is here in module 4, word meaning worksheets. It says completion grade, but I'm not necessarily sure I want you guys in this, to submit it, but I am going to have you guys share what you do in class. So it's there for me to use if I need to. If I must, I will go ahead and just delete it so you guys don't see that there's something missing. I know that. So for some of you guys, you really are looking closely at what's due, and I appreciate that because then I know if I need to change a due date that maybe I forgot to, I can do that for you. So I appreciate those of you guys who do that kind of stuff. Okay, so I would like each one of you to, or I got each one of you go ahead and pull up the Word document that looks just like this. And it really looks, it's got a lot of the information from the PowerPoint that we looked at on Wednesday. So this is kind of like content vocabulary activity. I used to have students create a presentation, but we do so many other things that are different from way back when we used to really focus on this and I would give a grade for it, that it really is just something that I want you guys to practice. And then you're going to end up kind of doing a lot of this when you write your vocabulary lesson, which is not going to be hard, especially when I show you some examples of what you need to do. It's very similar to what you did this past weekend, but there are some differences that really relate to what we're going to do today, which is creating those definitions and coming up with some context. When I say context, it could be photos, but you also want to tap into context when you're asking kids to express their understanding of what they've learned. So we talked about meaningful use prompts, sentence completions, and word associations. And so what I've done for you on this page, and this was really useful back when I would actually hand this paper out to students, is I've got some examples and they're actually really from the PowerPoint that we looked at Wednesday. So meaningful use prompts is, can my student use the new vocabulary word in a meaningful way? And I come up with a prompt that I want them to respond to. And I'm going to get a different response from every child, but if the response is correctly using the word's context, you know they understand the word a lot better than if they just memorize the definition, right? So if I'm choosing the word, whatever word in your content that you want to, I might ask, what are things you would expect to see in an urbanized area? Things you would not expect to see. What are some examples? Where are some places you would find? So here we're kind of tapping into the students' understanding of how the word is used in context. So, and we're going to practice doing that with actual words that you guys are okay in a little bit. I think sentence completions are a little bit easier. I've seen this done a variety of ways where students use vocabulary to kind of have students complete the sentence. They're still using what they know about the word and using it in context. But here we have almost like cause and effect examples. They don't have to be cause and effect examples. Urbanization creates major changes in the landscape of an area because, and then they complete it. Urbanization may contribute to global warming. And in this case, if you'll notice, they're both bold. So you're kind of using two words. You don't have to do that unless you want to do like go way up above and beyond, but that would be another example. Trees and other plants have a lot to do with global warming because. So these cause and effect examples of sentence completion, again, students are using the word in context. They're thinking about what the word is and how it's used in the real, in your content area. And then finally, word associations, which I think are the easiest ones to create. What word goes with polluted air? Here, what you've done is kind of taken your student-friendly definition and you've flipped it. I'm going to use kind of what the word sort of means in some context and have them kind of produce the word from their vocabulary list that I'm looking for. So really, of all of these three different types of meaningful use, or yeah, of I guess context, the first two, I'm going to expect kids to give me a variety of answers because they're going to use their understanding, they're going to use perhaps some specific different context. The third one, word associations, yeah, you're expecting the students to identify the vocabulary word. But again, it's better than saying match the definition. I did that to you guys, I know, on the dyslexia quiz. Sorry, but if I'm teaching students in my classroom stuff that they need to know going on in my course, this is a better way to check their understanding because they're using it in context. They're really using the word, okay? So here's what I'm gonna ask you guys to do, and you can work in pairs or in trios on this. If you look at the second page, you are gonna decide with your partner or partners one word from a content area. So my music majors want to choose a music word, they can. What's a good word for students to learn if they're taking 8th grade band or music or whatever. Then I'm going to create my own or our own student-friendly definition for that word, trying to avoid a lot of complicated language. I mean, you can kind of explore, look for synonyms if you want to use your computers on that, and that's fine. So a student-friendly definition, and then I want you to try to create one example of each of them, just one. One example of a meaningful use prompt, one example of a sentence completion, and one example of a word association. Can you guess why I'm saying one? I've had students think they had to come up with 3 like the little, you don't have to, just one. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have made it clear, just one. So yeah, one example of each, and then I'm gonna give y'all some time to work on it with your partner or partners, and then I want you to share what you did. And if I give you feedback and I say, hey, maybe you should have maybe changed this word to something else, don't feel bad, I do it all the time. It's like, because you as content experts, you know this stuff really well, but I wanna make sure that that I kind of help you along with, let's say my typical 8th grader or 9th grader may not know what this word means. Is there another word we can choose? Although sometimes there isn't a better word and you're kind of stuck, and that's okay. I'll recognize that when I see it. But otherwise, that's what I want y'all to do. You're not turning anything in, but I do want at least one person in your group or your partnership to type it out so we can share it in class. Sound good? Okay, I'm gonna pause the video. I hope I remember to turn it back on so that when we start doing stuff on vocabulary in a minute, I can talk through it and the folks at home can hear what we did, okay? All right. There we go. Actually. Pause. Okay, so we're giving examples real quick of the different elements of assessing students' understanding of words using context. And we've already talked to music, who had a fantastic description. Science had a fantastic description. Everyone else I'm sure does too. Who wants to go next? All right, okay, cool. What was your word?
Chrysalis.
Chrysalis, okay. What's your student-friendly definition?
Transitioning from one stage of life to another, semicolon, transformation.
Okay. All right, so what is your meaningful use prompt?
Which insects can chrysalises be seen in nature?
Awesome, cool. Your sentence completion?
When a caterpillar emerges from their chrysalis, ...
Okay, cool. All right, and then finally the, I remember. Yeah, that
one. Which word goes with the transition of caterpillars to butterflies?
Perfect. So awesome job. Another science example. All right, and then I have 2 groups left. Y'all want to go? Okay, biology. Here we go, biology.
Our word is element.
Okay.
And the student-friendly definition is a substance on the periodic table that cannot be broken down into any other substance.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and what is your meaningful use prompt?
Things you expect to see on the periodic table.
Okay,
The sentence completion is elements cannot be broken down into any other substance because
ooh, that's good. All right, and then finally, word association.
which word is used when you have one type of atom with the same number of photons.
Awesome. Those are super good for like upper middle school, high school. Very good. Finally, I'm gonna pick on my students who did, I'm not sure what content area. So what is your word? What word did y'all choose? What's that?
We picked the word manuscript.
Nice, okay.
The student-friendly definition, a piece of writing written or typed that has not been published yet.
Nice, okay.
Meaningful use of prompts, examples of historical manuscripts.
Okay,
Sentence completion, a manuscript is an important part of the reading process because.
okay.
And then word association, which word is associated with a rough draft of a piece of writing?
Nice, okay. Y'all did so good. And I'm not gonna say this, you do not tell anybody else, this is the best a group has done with this, because it's not that easy, especially if this is your first time thinking about vocabulary and thinking about how to approach it with students. And so, great job. And I'm hoping everybody on the recording heard the examples. They were really good. I do have examples on that PowerPoint you can look at, but you know, I feel like y'all's real life examples are a little more what you might see in a real classroom for middle school, high school. So awesome job. Okay, so you guys are gonna work with this a little bit tomorrow. So what I would like you to do, if at all possible, save what you did. Because those are better examples than what I would provide you, because that's something that you might actually literally use with what we're gonna do tomorrow, which is basically we're gonna work on a vocabulary lesson plan. It's not that hard. It's basically the only thing that's tricky about it is which words are you focusing on? What's your student-friendly definition? That's the only hard part. I'm not going to ask you to go in depth and start giving me some meaningful use prompts though, because that's really more, we don't have the time for that. So that being said, let me go ahead and share my screen again, and we are moving into vocabulary strategies. So, all right, ignore that. Let me go, actually, no. What I was doing was coming up with a journal prompt for you guys, and I'll finish it later. It's not a big deal. It's really easy to do. So I have this thing called the big PowerPoint of vocabulary strategies. I also have a video recording of me talking through it, but since I'm recording this for the class anyway, I might actually replace what I have here. So I'm going to download the PowerPoint. It's a lot of strategies. And that's, but what I want you to focus on is the strategies that you think are most important. So at some place, take a note of which ones you like. If you can type it into a Word document, or into, like if you have a map and you've got sticky notes, put it on sticky notes, and I'll let you focus on those. It's a lot easier, I think, than filling it out as we go. Because this way I can kind of talk through it. You can think about the ones you like, jot it down, and then go back and do the chart later. Okay? Because this, like I said, it's a really huge PowerPoint. Okay, I think it downloaded. I'm over here clicking it again, just to confuse my computer. Here we go. And I call it the big PowerPoint because this used to be 3 separate PowerPoints, which is ridiculous. So I went through it, I organized it, it's one. And a lot of these are in your textbook. Some of them may not be, and that's okay. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is the different features of these strategies of content vocabulary. There's lots of different strategies that are going to help you learn new words. It's really going to depend on the kinds of connections or the kinds of ways that students are going to be integrating them into what you're doing. So integration means making connections with concepts that students already know, so the vocabulary is more easily integrated. So here we're tapping into student schema with integration. Clarification, verifying the meaning of polysemous words, words that mean 2 different things in different content areas. The word adjacent, for example, in mathematics has a very specific meaning rather than adjacent in real life, right? So we want to make sure students can clarify what it means in your class and what it means in my mathematics class. I know there's words in music that are also used in science, but they have very different meanings. I can't think of the words right offhand, but those are polysemous words. Identification, here we're using strategies like prior knowledge, mnemonic devices, I said it right, and imagery to increase word knowledge. I always have a hard time with that word. Linguistic attention, using morphemes like root, prefixes, and suffixes to define unknown words. And then finally, metacognition and assessment. These are probably the most effective strategies. The only hard thing, the thing about metacognition and assessment as a way to integrate vocabulary, it is a little bit more time consuming. And when we get to the strategies, you'll see why. Okay, so I want to make sure we don't run late. Oh, it's only awesome. All right, so integration strategies. And these are some that I think a lot of students can use for whatever content you're teaching. There's list group label, word sorts, and semantic features analysis grids, where we're categorizing words. Or showing relationships, and we have the semantic word map, concept of the definition map, which can be either word detectives or verbal to visual, concept circles, and forced associations. I'll talk a little bit about forced associations. It's not the most easy to integrate vocabulary strategy. It's probably more in line with students who, or teachers who might be working with a pre-AP class, or perhaps teaching across content areas. So let's look at these strategies then. See what I mean? There's a lot, and that's just one type right here. List group label, if you looked at chapter 8 in your book, it's really easy to use. Here, I'm going to give the list of vocabulary words and ask my students to group them in a way that they think makes sense. So they're activating background knowledge and they're putting words together. And then finally, give each of those groups a label of some kind. Give them the list, they make the groups, and they make the labels. Okay. And if you think about it, when would this be most, I mean, you could use this at the beginning before you actually work on vocabulary, or it could actually be a really good way of having students do a quick assessment at the end of a unit of study. So using this at the beginning or the end would be great. Especially if it would be good at the beginning if you know students have some sort of prior knowledge of the words. It would be good for at the end as a quick assessment if I know that most of the words are new to them. Let's see how well they can put them together. And if they're making these connections, they're also going to be able to remember the meaning a lot better because they've got something associated with it that they can draw on their schema. So here would be an example of a lot of words. Would I use all these words in list group label? Maybe, maybe not. That's a lot of words, but this would be a good example of let's make connections between these words and create groups. And so you can see that I've got words like faults, epicenter, plates. Those are going to probably go together, right? Because those are features of the earth. So you can see how if I've had students doing this in a small group or having them do it individually, even if they only have maybe a small inkling of what the words mean, they're making those connections at the beginning. Or at the end, they can put them together in a meaningful way that's based on what they've learned about these words. Okay? List group label. If you like it, jot it down. Word sorts are similar to list group label, but now it's a lot like list group label. But here we're having the vocabulary and then manipulate them into groups. I've actually done this in doctoral classes. It's really effective with brand new vocabulary for us to help make connections as we're learning. So it's like list group label, except it's more about manipulating and moving. It's more kinesthetic, really. Okay. So what I might do here is take these words and cut them into pieces, into squares. Put them in a little Ziploc, sandwich bag. Give them to the students and ask them to move them around in a way that into groups that they think make sense together, and then have them share their groups. So it's similar, but it's more kinesthetic, and hopefully that makes sense because. That was an open word sort. If you need to scaffold the instruction for students, you might want to give them the labels. So I'm going to cut these out like before. I'm going to mix them all up. And I'm going to say, Organize these by American Revolution, Civil War, and World War II. So it's a lot like List Group Label. It's more about manipulating the words, but it's also, there's also a really great way to scaffold it for students who need that extra support, okay? So open word sort would have been this one, but that's your closed word sort, okay? Very, very, very similar to those two. And it's integrating, it's activating background knowledge in many cases, or, you know, coming back at the end of a unit of study and can kind of, you know, a quick assessment on what I've learned. Okay. Semantic features analysis grids. These are fun. I think they really lend themselves more to science and math, but a semantic features analysis grid is kind of teacher created, where I'm assessing their understandings of concepts and having them do it in a grid format. So here, the new vocabulary words are reptile and amphibian. And students show their comprehension by checking off the different types of animals with their appropriate characteristics. So it's not just learning about reptiles and amphibians. It's also, well, let me show you the next example. Because this one's probably a lot more complex, because now not only do I need to know the differences in these geometric shapes, but I need to know what a diagonal is, what a bisect is, what congruent means, and so forth. Perpendicular. So it's like I said, it really lends itself to science or with mathematics. It depends on what you're teaching and what you're focusing on, but it's a really good, quick way to assess their understanding of your vocabulary. And in this case, they're kind of using context also. They're understanding how their vocabulary words are connected with each other as well, okay? So if you're a math science person, that might be something that you like. We already talked about fact storming. Semantic word maps is like fact storming, but here we're focusing on vocabulary. And yeah, I used a rinky-dink word like shark. I found it, I thought it's a great example. All right, so they're gonna talk to this class about what do I know about sharks. This is probably something you want to do as a whole class, so that students are sharing what they know and we're activating background knowledge across the classroom. And then after you learn more about your vocabulary, you can add to it. So, like I said, it's just like fact storming or semantic, you know, it's semantic word map. It's the same thing, but it's focused more on the vocabulary rather than on one topic like the presidency or Theodore Roosevelt or ancient Egypt. So yeah, that's something that is also one of those very multi-use strategies that a lot of people might appreciate. I'm going to slow down. Does anyone have any questions yet? Do these make sense? I hope. They're really good strategies. And what's great about them is you're not just assigning and assessing, which is, have you ever heard the expression assigning and assessing? Yeah, it's when you give students an assignment and you expect them to learn it on their own, and then you give them a test. So here we're really teaching a much more deep, we're teaching the vocabulary much more deeply than an assign assess type of situation. Everyone loves, it seems like, the verbal and visual word association strategy. I mean, you wouldn't do this with every single word in a vocabulary list, but you might want to maybe spread it out around the class, have them do it in groups. Here, they're not just using what the definition is, but they're also perhaps have a visual representation. It could even be symbolic if you teach English. And a personal association or characteristics. And you can change some of those if you want to, but I think the power is if you know what you're teaching is very visual, having the verbal to visual can be super helpful to kids. And it's good, I think, for most, if not all, content areas. And it's fun. I mean, students enjoy doing something a little different rather than, you know, memorizing definitions. I'll give you a second. Okay, and when we used to do, when I did this in a class where we went out into the field and students use these strategies with kids, this was a popular one because it's really useful and it's multi-purpose. This one's a lot like visual to verbal. It's a little different. It's called the Word Detective though. I'm not really wild about the title of it because it sounds like it's for little kids, right? You don't have to call it Word Detective. but it's similar to verbal to visual because you do want to have a visual, representation. Here the word is transformation. And of course, transformation is kind of hard to draw, but here the student was able to pull in some images off the internet. And you've got your, where did I find it in the book? What were the context clues? Y'all know what context clues are? What words in the book or the story or the paragraph gave me hints to what it means? What part of speech is it? My own sentence, my own definition, and then an image, okay? So if I'm gonna find the word in the book, am I going to work on this before I read or while I'm reading? Maybe during or after I read. I need to go back in the book and look for it, okay? So keep that in mind too. I'm pretty sure on your chart, it's gonna ask you A, B, D. When would I use a strategy? Before, during, or after reading or learning. And in some cases, you could use it in more than one way. Here, I would say during or even after. This would make no sense giving it to them before they've got to the text. But it is a good way to, have kids work on a deeper understanding of what the words mean. Okay. I'm gonna slow down. I keep thinking I'm gonna run out of time. I think we're gonna be fine. Okay, but it is a really long PowerPoint. All right, so here we have concept circles. Students are provided main vocabulary of important to the topic being learned. They read the text that utilizes the word. They generate a definition for each new word, and they identify central concepts. And that's kind of hard to explain, but I hope this link works. It worked last summer. This gives you a better idea of what concept circles are like. If you go to this, here, I'm looking for the handout. Here we go. It's not there, don't say that. No, it's dead link. I hate dead links. Okay. I'm gonna keep trying. Yes, there it is. Okay. So here, and I'm gonna go back so you got an idea of that. I'm gonna do this. So carefully read through a complex piece of text. They'll be asked to read and understand an updating unit, look for a handout of words or terms that bear a significant amount of the meaning. And then, so range vocabulary to support student understanding. So in other words, maybe informed consent, biospecimens, genetic medicine, and co-modification. Students should take notes and jot down new understandings for each concept in the outer sections, and they discuss and conclude. If I show you an example of a completed one, it's going to make more sense. I mean, it's really nice having the handout that actually already works. Here's a sample handout. These have answers on it. So there we go. So here's our words. What's the main theme? What do I understand now about those words? It's a little different. You want to have words that have some similarities between each other, that have connections. So it's theme in the middle, words in the central circle, on the outside, what these words mean. And you're also making connections across. So yeah, I feel like that's going to give you a better idea of how this works. Has anyone ever seen or used concept circles before? I actually had a few students last summer really like this strategy. Okay. Again, it's probably one of those that you can't use for everything, but it was on readwritethink.org. Do you know about that website? It's a really good website. It does a lot of really good language arts and stuff, reading and writing activities, grades K through 12. So, all right, let me go back here. Yeah, this one was always kind of tricky for me because I'm like, how do I explain this? It's so like theme in the middle and then understandings. And I forgot, I added this to the PowerPoint. There we go. I'm always making modifications to these things. This is one that probably is the hardest one to use. And I did have one of my UTSA students try this with this class and it worked fine. It was a history class. And here you're trying to write sentences that use words across two content areas. So I've got words from history and words from science. This is really a much more advanced kind of vocabulary activity. This is why I kind of, suggest using it with high school or maybe even AP classes. And here are some examples of what it might look like. Force associations, I'm going to write some sentences talking about how two of the words from each, or one of the words from each, are similar in meaning. Racism is vile and can hurt people. toxic substances are vile and can hurt people. Okay, so I can make an analogy between two, right? Propaganda and fossil fuels both pollute. Propaganda pollutes information people receive, and fossil fuels pollute the environment. So this is something that's going to take a lot of thinking. I would probably give a group of kids 2 words and have them work on something like a force association. Here, the idea is they make the associations on their own. But for a middle school or even like 9th, 10th grade, I may need to scaffold this a lot if I wanted to use it. Okay, so force associations. So we are done with the integration strategies. We're on to clarification. And there's lots of different ways to clarify meanings of multiple meaning words. Contextual approaches, multiple meanings, or functional vocabulary. Some of these they're good to know, but I don't really expect anybody to jot down that they're excited about it. But there's ways that some of these can be used with kids who need these sorts of strategies. So, contextual approaches. All right, so this is called contextual redefinition. So it's really similar, let me think. It's kind of similar to the word detective, where students are thinking about the context and then like context clues within a sentence. And here they're coming up with their own definition and then checking it against the actual definition. So you have a word like seismology, and let's say, and you're going to use this at the beginning of the end of this study. We're going to expect kids to sort of think about the words, the word parts, and things like that. So seismology. Well, the word level clues. I know ology means a study of, so it's going to be the study of something. Context clues. They're talking about earthquakes, so maybe learning more about earthquakes. The study of learning more about earthquakes, right? So I think it's the study of earthquakes, including the effects, location, and timing. Study of earthquakes. There we go. So it's just kind of like, what do I know about the words? Chunking it, like morphology, chunking it. Then what are some clues from the passage or the paragraph or the sentence that help me? And then I take a guess at what I think it means. Fault. Well, I know fault means when you do something wrong, it's your fault. So, but they're talking about weak areas in the earth. So a weak area in the earth's crust where an earthquake occurs, and they nailed it. It's the weak area in the earth. So that's kind of the idea. Tsunami was harder. So, right. That is contextual redefinition. Verbal charades. Actually, this is fun. Students are placed in teams and earn points if they're able to guess the vocabulary words acted out by their team members. There's really no other way to explain that. This is a good, fun, quick assessment activity to do at the end of the unit of study. And yeah, I don't even know if that link works anymore, but you get the idea. Students get in groups. It's like verbal, it's like charades. You know what charades are? You act things out, you can't say anything, but they've got to figure out what the word means. And of course, it's not going to work for all vocabulary words, but it might be something fun if it does actually lend itself to what you're doing. And please work. Please work. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to cry. Dead links, that's the least of it. There we go. No big deal. But y'all get the idea. I think if I just say verbal charades, you do this, it makes sense. Okay. Well, I'm not a fan of using worksheets with vocabulary learning, but here's a little bit of an exception. Typical and technical is where I take what I know about a word, like in everyday life, and I compare it to how the word's used in a content area. So you're comparing typical to technical. So they give you some examples of some activities you could do. Yeah, it's a worksheet, but it's fine. It says exercise 1, just an example of what you might do. Select the correct common and mathematical definitions for each term. Okay, so common meaning for acute. What's the technical meaning for acute? You put the A, B, C, D through H in each blank. So they know what the word means in the real world and everyday language in the typical sense, but they also understand what it means in the technical sense. Or fill in the blank. So it's exercise 2. Here are your words, fill the blank. And the words the sentences I have here are examples of using it technically. I'm using it typically, okay? I feel like this might be a really good way to help students in special education classes where they need to learn new words, but they need to tap into what they already know about the word. This also, I mean, that's one thing I'm thinking of. It's also just kids who are struggling with vocabulary. If you know it's words that is something that's used in the real world, having them utilize something quick like this is going to be a help, just kind of help them use the words more. The more a student uses a word in writing and speech and reading, the better they're going to learn it. I'm going to slow down. I say that and I don't. All right, now these are really good for students who need help with, let's say, language. Lots of students might have experienced difficult time with language because maybe they're learning English as a second language. Perhaps they're for some other reason. There's just a language issue. Could be they could be on the autism spectrum, and language is an issue. My son, for example, he's 18 and he still has a hard time with syntax and understanding how some procedural words work together when he's using his oral language. So this one here, what you would do is just kind of help students understand procedural phrases. And it can be done in lots of ways. With vocabulary examples, some short ones like this. There's also lists online of different procedural phrases that kids can kind of access so they can understand what they mean. Okay, so yeah, this is not one of those that you would use with every kid, but for some students, this could be really beneficial, especially if you know they're going to see these phrases in your text quite a bit. Okay, then here's just an example from Hair and Nails. You have all this procedural information, and some kids may need access to help them understand the entire passage. But again, procedural, that's not for all students, okay? Here is a chart. It's long. I'm not going to give this to all my students, but some of my students may need it. The chart is showing me which phrases are talking about similarities, which phrases are showing differences, and so on, okay? So yeah, procedural vocabulary chart, great for certain students who need it, but not all kids are going to need this, okay? The next one is very similar. It's signal word list. It's another word list. I'm almost certain my link is dead. They changed the website. I was so disappointed just a few years ago, but it's really similar. Signal words help students identify the direction a text is going. The use of signal words in chart format can help support comprehension. If the link's dead, I'm going to find another place. I know it lives out there. But I think what they did on this website, yeah, is they chunked it and they kind of changed the web pages. So I'm not going to go to their web page. I'm just going to go here and type in, do it with a new tab because I need those tabs. Signal word list. Okay. And I need to change it on this because I'm constantly going to this thing. Come on, word. Here we go. Okay. So this is what it was. See, so we have these signal words, and that's great, but it's so comprehensive that it was really hard to put it all on one page. And it was a crazy long page. But if you need to teach, like, signal words, that's, again, something similar to what I would do with students who have those language needs. And if that's the case, then great. That's an idea for you to use with your students. I wouldn't give them all of the signal words. I'd probably give them a list of words that you know they're going to come across in your class. Because honestly, the original list I had with that link, that's now a dead link, was absolutely so long. It was just, yeah. So I was like showing students, here's how you do Control F. But y'all know how to do Control F. But again, it's really good for students who need that support. Okay, the wrong button. I'm making everybody watching on the video dizzy. Okay, here we go. But I believe we are at the end of that section of vocabulary words. Yay! Identification strategies. And some of these are fun. But I'll tell you right now, a lot of these aren't necessarily something everybody can use. I feel like some of the earlier strategies are kind of multi-use. Some of these are specific to what you're doing. Visualization, like keyword methods, verbal to visual word association, which we already talked about, or mnemonic devices, trick to be used. And this doesn't apply to everything. I know in music there's some mnemonics, right? Like, give us an example. There we go, and also face, right? Yeah, so face, those are the letters or the notes on a scale. So yeah, I mean, here's Holmes, which is for the Great Lakes, Roy G. Biv, the colors of a rainbow, and so on. So in some ways, these are really great ways for kids to learn the vocabulary and learn concepts, but it doesn't work for everybody. Keyword method is a little different. It's an aid to help students learn new vocabulary words, and when using the strategy, the learner makes a connection between a new word and an image involving some action to help them. So for example, a student of French could remember that pan is the French word for bread by vividly picturing a loaf of bread in a pan. But I'm also thinking pain, but it's pan. That's a really good class. I never taught French. All right, so here's some examples. Keyword strategies work best under these conditions. And when the keyword is obvious and readily available. When the association between the keyword and the target word can be vividly and unambiguously pictured in the mind. When both the word to be learned and the keyword are concrete, rather than abstract. Okay. So there's lots of ways you can use it. I had fun with some of my students, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. Here are some examples of how you might use mnemonics. The Broca's area, the keyword is broken. That word means directs muscles for speech production. So imagine breaking a talking doll. If it gets broken, it won't talk. Broca's area. So it's a mental image that helps me remember what the word means, and so forth. Now, I'm not going to go into all of these, but with 1 year, I got really into this with my 7th graders. And we, every now and then, I think on Fridays, we would play around with some of this. I had a book that was full of these different keyword examples. This is the word fathom, and the keyword is fat thumb. So fathom means to understand fully, to penetrate the meaning of. So doctors could never fathom the reason for Larry's fat thumb. Something silly like that. I had another one. I hope I shared it here too. Yeah, I do. Irascible. This is my favorite. The keyword is wrestle bulls. Irascible means easily angered and irritable. When he became irascible, the masked marvel would wrestle bulls. That's kind of funny. But the image itself is funny. That poor bull is totally confused. But that's, yeah, so, and you can totally tell that that's not something you can use for everything, but it will work with certain words if you need it to. Okay. All right. This is another one of those strategies that are sort of, they work with certain words and not others. So students can learn new vocabulary by using parts of new words that they may or be more familiar with, like the words amendment. Maybe I don't know what that word means, but I know what it means to mend something. So amendment is a way of mending the Constitution by making changes. This is how I learned horizontal from vertical, seriously. Horizontal, I know what horizon is. Think about the sky's horizon when you think about the direction that this word refers to. How many of y'all use that? Have you used it? I have. Oh, the vertical, horizontal. I thought about the H in the middle of the H, and I thought of horizon. So yeah, mental image to help kids understand a word based on what a part of the word means, especially if they know what that part of that word really means. We are getting toward the end. Hooray. Okay. Linguistic attention. These are a lot more similar to what you might see in the English classroom, but that really would work well with other content areas. They're a lot more involved. This one is word family tree. Similar idea. It reminds me a little bit of Word Detective, but we don't have the visual image. There's more to it though. You're going to have information about the etymology of the word relatives, memory. There's lots of different ways to do a word family tree. This is just one example. But here you are paying attention to lots of different things about the word. Maybe this is a word that you know is going to come up later. Maybe it's a word I'm teaching vocabulary to prepare my students for the ACT. So just kind of think about when you might use something like this. It's really involved. It's really specific. It uses context, the definition, who would say it, pick 3 kinds of people who would say it, and write a sentence using it. Really involved. I would not have expect kids to do this with a 20 word vocabulary list. That would be ridiculous. But for really important words, it could be very, very helpful. Okay, there's another blank example. Okay, this one is fun, and I wish we had time for it, but we don't. Root monsters. It's a fun activity that supports students' understanding of Greek and Latin roots. So you could use this before you teach a group of Latin and Greek words, like a fun, like a starter activity. It could also be used at the end. Greek and Latin roots are not fun to have to memorize. I mean, I love vocabulary, but I remember it being a very, very dry assignment when we were expected to learn all of these. There we go. All of these roots. And so basically, you would get a list of, let me pull one up too, because it helps when you see it. I usually, if I had time, we would do something with this. It's a lot of fun, but we don't have time today. So you look up. There we go. I would give my students a list of the Greek and Latin roots that we're either using in class or maybe a big list of Greek and Latin roots. And there are so many. So here are some common ones. And then I would say, I want you to create a creature using at least, what I told my class in here, 7 Greek and Latin roots. So they would come up with some made up word and then draw and illustrate what they have. And so what you have is, I'm pretty sure this one is a bicornus quadrupod, something like that. It has lots of different words, Greek and Latin roots. I've had some amazing drawings from my art majors when it comes to coming up with a 7 Greek and Latin root creature using those words. And then they have them present their creature to the class and explain how each part of the name of it's a monocephalatus quadrupod, anyway. So, I just realized it's right there. But no, when my students do it, they come up with all kinds of really wonderful examples. So I did have a student use this with kids, and it was really effective. They had they couldn't find a substitute. She was doing her not student teaching. She was doing she was field basing. And so they found a sub, the sub didn't have any plans, and so she did this with a science class. And it was a lot of fun, so the kids really enjoyed it. So it was something to do. They were learning about Greek and Latin roots, and they were having a good time learning about them. So there we go. There's an idea for if you are forced to teach Greek and Latin roots. All right, now I love these strategies, but they are a little bit of work for the teacher. And their vocabulary self-selection, knowledge rating scale, and personal vocabulary journal. Actually, knowledge rating scale is not that hard. A lot of students really like that strategy. So, content vocabulary self-selection, it basically is students go through the text and they identify the words that they feel they want to learn more about. It's them as a class selecting which vocabulary words they're going to focus on for that unit of study. Here's some examples or some steps you could do, but at the same time, that's the gist of it. Having the students identify those vocabulary words that they feel that they would like to learn. But you can also do that with a knowledge rating scale, which is basically a worksheet with your vocabulary words, and you ask kids to tell me what you know about those words. Do you know it well? Have you seen it or heard it? or have you never seen it in your life? You have no clue what that word means. I would probably switch these, and then here on the know it well, I'd say, tell me what you think it means. What do you think it means? That way I'm also, if they think they know what the word means, they may be incorrect, or they may be using the word in a different context, right? Than I need to teach it in. This will also help you come up with the vocabulary you need to focus on with your kids. And it's easy to use. This will take about 10 minutes in class to go over vocabulary with kids at the beginning of a unit of study, and then you can decide as the teacher which words need to be focused on. That's popular and it's easy to use. So. And then finally, personal vocabulary journals. Thing is, I think a lot of classes still use these. I know my when I taught in middle school, I had something similar to it with my language arts kids. And the science teachers and history teachers did as well. They called them their learning journals, but there was always a section for vocabulary. And so a vocabulary journal is where students can keep track of what they've learned about a word's meaning, and they have access to it for study or for activities in the classroom. You don't have to make it boring. Yes, you cannot use basically something like this where it's like a worksheet and they want them to answer certain things. Or you can have fun with it and use one of the other strategies within the vocabulary journal. So, and again, it takes a little bit more work on the teacher because you're having to really think about what words do I want to have kids focus on, what activity do I want to use, how am I going to set this up. But those three strategies I feel like are probably the most beneficial to kids because it's really individualizing what they need to learn and so forth. So, you know what? I think that's the last page. And it was a lot. It was a ton. That's why it's the big PowerPoint of vocabulary words. Okay, so that being said, and it is 11:23. Oh my, I knew this was going to happen. We're going to go right to the end, but I'm going to send you guys away with something to do. Nothing's going to be due tonight. Some of the stuff's going to be due tomorrow and then Wednesday, Thursday. But what I want you to do is, and this is always fun because I'm in the wrong, that's right there. All right, so we got that. And in the week 5, I think I moved to the week 5 now. In the week 5 tab or module or whatever they call it. Yeah, I'm in the right course. Come on, don't do this to me. All right, so I have the vocabulary chart. I want you to just kind of start it. You don't have to turn it in. We'll work on it some more tomorrow. But if you, oh goodness, here it is. I'll make sure you've got ready access to it. This looks like it's a little bit hard to get. Here we go. Open, 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 open. It's all those words we talked about. Some of them aren't on the chart, and that's fine, because I knew that some of them aren't necessarily something I could see you using with an entire group of kids. But it's a long chart. I only want you to pick 3 strategies that you think look good for what you will do in the classroom. Description, like before, you tell me what a good, like a student-friendly definition of what this does, right? BDA. Y'all know what that means now, right? Will I use it before they approach a text or a video or whatever? Will I use it while they're in the text, or am I going to use it as a short, quick assessment at the end? You can say more than one. And we talked about how there is some of these do apply to more than one of those things. And then any comments you want. You don't have to even fill out that last column unless you really want to. So I want you to at least go through this. Hopefully you took some notes and you know which 3 you like, and you fill it out for the 3 you like, because you're going to use one tomorrow. Okay? And since it's so close to the end of class, though, I'm going to turn the light on. Here we go. I'm going to let y'all go with today's assignment. And I'm going to put an announcement up here for you, too. Okay. Let me go ahead and I'm going to keep sharing my screen. I'm really glad I'm still recording. All right. So back to modules. Okay. Only I knew an easier way to do this. That's okay. Make sure I'm in our class, go to week 5. I'm going to create a journal assignment. I'm going to ask you guys to respond to it. And basically what I want you to do is think about students' attitudes or motivation to write at the beginning of our tutoring sessions. share at least 4 sentences or as much as you want to, because we know that some of the attitudes changed, right? But talk about at the beginning, and if you have anything you remember about things that students said, I'm thinking about I'm sorry, I thought she was adorable, but she did not like writing. If you remember anything specific a kid said, or I've got it written down, but I don't know if I can use those, share it with me in that journal. And so 4 sentences or more. What were students' attitudes or motivation to write at the beginning of your sessions with them? Sound good? Okay, so start your vocabulary chart and complete journal 1. Any questions? You guys are free to go. Tomorrow we're writing lesson plans. We're gonna probably do the same as we did today and go almost all the way to the end. If not, the end. I will not keep you late, so don't worry about that. Good job, guys. Thank y'all. I'm gonna send the announcement now. I don't want to forget. All right, guys, if you're watching the video at home, have a good evening and I hope you're having a good time in your campuses. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you somewhere on campus in the fall.